Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rick Hallett. I am not one of the pastors. I like to refer to myself as kind of the fun uncle who gets to do whatever he wants on occasion and can screw around. So if I say anything or I misspeak or whatever, please give me grace. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll get right into it. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for another morning where we can wake up, gather together, worship you freely and openly, where we can have breath in our lungs and a roof over our heads. You provide, you take care of us, and we just ask for a blessing on this service, that you would remove me, that I am just put out of the way, that your word would convey what you want it to convey to these people, and that we would just take it to heart. We love you and thank you and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we are in 1 Samuel chapter 27 today. But a quick recap. Jason preached last week on 26, and essentially the story is another story. Jason's was another story of how Saul was basically delivered to David. David could have killed him. He was standing over him. He had a spear, and he could have just ended everything, but he chose not to. He chose to abide and to not harm or murder one of God's anointed, and so he left out. And so this chapter takes place, there's no time frame that we can guess from, but it's rather right after, right? So it could be a couple days, it could be the next day, it could be a couple weeks. That's important because I think chapter 27 is one of the most insane chapters of David's life. And that's a bit dramatic, but we're going to dive in here and see why. So let's read together. It's not a lot. It's chapter 27. It says, "Then David said in his heart, 'Now I shall perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand.' So David arose and went over, he and the 600 men who were with him, to Achish, the son of Maach, king of Gath. And David lived with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man and his household. And David, with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. And when it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought him. Then David said to Achish, 'If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be given to me in one of your country towns, that I may dwell there. For why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you?' So that day Achish gave him Ziklag. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah since this day. And the number of the days that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and made raids against the Geshurites, the Gizurites, the Amalekites, and these were the inhabitants of the land of old, as far as Shur to the land of Egypt. And David would strike the land and would leave neither man nor woman alive, but would take away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the garments, and come back to Achish. When Achish asked, 'Where have you made a raid today?' David would say, 'Against the Negeb of Judah,' or 'against the Negeb of the Jeremites.'" I'm going to butcher some of these things. That's my fault. "Or against the Negeb of the Kenites. And David would leave neither man nor woman alive to bring news to Gath, thinking lest they should tell about us and say, 'So David has done.' Such was his custom, and all the while he lived in the country of the Philistines. And Achish trusted David, thinking, 'He has made himself an utter stench to his people Israel. Therefore he shall always be my servant.'" Okay. So there's something almost jarring about 1 Samuel chapter 27. If any of you have been following David's story up to this point, right, he's a shepherd boy, and then he gets anointed by Samuel, and then he becomes this fierce warrior. He kills Goliath. He goes and he's just like one of the baddest warriors out there. And this chapter feels like a sudden drop in altitude. Like it just swipes his feet out. This is David, the giant killer, the worshiper, the man who stood before Saul and said, the Lord who delivered me from the lion and the bear will deliver me from this Philistine Goliath. Like, this guy had faith, right? And yet here something shifts. David, the same David, decides to run to the Philistines. He's running to the people that Goliath represented, the people that hate Israel. Not because God told him to, not because there was no other option, but because he was tired. He's exhausted from running from Saul. Saul is constantly pursuing him, and he's tired. And if we're honest, that's where this chapter meets us. Not at our best, but at our most human. Because I think we can all, David has done some things that we can just say, man, he's one of the greatest people of the Bible. But this is where we see David as the most human, right? Because I don't know about y'all, but we have some dark days from time to time where we wake up and we're just moody, and we're just sad, or we're a little depressed, or I don't want to do anything, or we get in our heads. And so this is where we actually get to see this from David. So our first point of today is, remember when your faith was strong. Remember when your faith was strong. Before we dive into David's failure, we need to focus on who David was, like his past history. He had a big history with God. He faced Goliath with confidence, not fear. He refused to kill Saul, even though he's had a couple chances. He's declared again and again, the Lord will deliver me. David wasn't new to faith. He wasn't a new believer. This was something that he's been in. He had receipts, as the kids would say, right? History, evidence. But in chapter 27, we read something shocking. And that is, David said in his heart, now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul. All of a sudden, after all this pursuing, all the chances he could have killed Saul, all the times he's got away, all of a sudden he comes to this moment where he says, he's going to get me one of these days. That's not faith anymore, right? That's the opposite. He didn't say this in a prayer. He didn't seek a prophet for guidance. He didn't inquire of the Lord. He just decided. This was his decision in his own head. And the moment you start making decisions based on your fears instead of your history with God, you're headed toward compromise. And that is dangerous. In late 2017, Chris and I found out that we were expecting our first kid, Luke. And at the time, I was a social worker making about $30,000 a year. And Krista was a freelance sign language interpreter, working best weeks, 20 hours a week, maybe. I don't know. So we were poor. That's the point of that. I remember our grocery budget was $50 a week, which is just mind-blowing that you could even do that. But this is 2017. So I called the hospital to see how much out of pocket we were going to have to pay for this kid. And they're like, oh, it's going to be between 10 and 15 grand, because I didn't have great insurance. I worked at a nonprofit and I didn't make a lot of money, and so that checks out. There was no way I could make 10 to 15K in the next few months, and so it was like, okay, what do I do, right? Gut reaction. As the man of my family, I have to step up and provide, and so there was, in my department at work, there was an open director position. I was a supervisor at the time, and the director position was open that paid quite a bit more, but the responsibilities were terrible. You were on call 24/7, 365. So at any moment, you could get a phone call and you'd have to step out and go take care of business. You were constantly getting phone calls, and then the other thing is you had 50 direct report staff, which is too many. And so really, if I would have taken that for the money, I would have never seen Krista. I never would have seen Luke. There would have been holidays, birthdays, things. I would have missed it all because I saw that job. That's why it was vacant, because the previous person was like, this is crazy, and just left. The stress would have been too much. And so instead of getting in my own head and just being like, I'm going to do it, this is what I got to do, instead of doing what David did, I was actually a good boy here, and we started praying. Kristen and I prayed every day, every single day. Lord, please provide. Please take care of this. This is in your hands. And the story can be a lot longer here, but essentially one of my cousins he was a development manager at a software company. And we were at dinner one night, and I was openly complaining about just how poor we were and how we were going to have to come up with 10 grand. And he said, well, why don't you come work for me? And I was like, I don't know how to code or do any of that computer nerdy stuff, you know. He's like, I don't need that. I just need someone to do what's called testing, where you just try to break the software. Like you just jam your mouse a million times, click on things, put stuff in boxes they're not supposed to be there, and just break it. And I was like, oh, I feel like I could do that. He's like, well, the health insurance is completely paid for. Like, you don't pay anything. And I was like, is that real? Like, I didn't know that was even an option. I thought people just had to pay for health insurance. And so not only did that job pay more than what I was making, but it was also completely free. He said, at worst, come work for me for a year, have a free baby, and then if you hate it, go back to what you're doing. And as God is my witness, when we got the hospital bill, it said $25,000. At the very bottom, it said, balance due, 000. So that's one of my favorite stories about God that was so big. And that's kind of the point one, is if I would have just cut God out like David did and stuck to my own thinking, I would have landed in a terrible job, not seen my son or wife, and compromised my faith. This story is one that I often think back to restabilize my faith whenever I'm struggling. And God came through in a big way. This is not what David did, right? He forgot about the lion. He forgot about the bear. He forgot about Goliath. He got in his own head, and everything went out the window when he started believing, this time I'm not going to make it. So when fear starts speaking louder than your faith, we have to go back and remember, what has God already done for you? What has he done in big ways? Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's great, Rick. You got these big stories, you know, and God answered these things for you that you can fall back on, but I don't have anything like that. Then pray, because that should be all of our knee-jerk reaction to tough times or good times, is prayer. You don't have it mastered. There's not a bad time for prayer. And if things are getting sticky, the Lord says, test me and see that I'm good. So pray and test him. Watch him deliver. And then you'll have stories like that where, and I'm not the only person. I know people in this room that have stories just like this. Faith grows when memory is strong. Memory is a blessed thing to have. And the Bible actually refers back to it a few different times about looking back. There's a good point at looking back and reflecting on things that God has done for you. It does a lot of big stuff. Point number 2, fear will push you into the wrong place. Fear will push you into the wrong place. David's conclusion leads to a dangerous decision. He says, there's nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines. He said there's nothing better than to go live in the land of his greatest enemies. That's the best case scenario that he thinks, right? That is wild. That like this little section of this little chapter of 27 just pops out, and it's just so uncharacteristically like David, but it's so dead on just like us, which is why I love it. This is David, the same Philistines where Goliath came from, the same people who hate Israel. Fear has a way of making bad options look reasonable. He runs to the king and starts living among the enemy. And it says for a year and 4 months. He didn't just visit. This wasn't like a reprieve to get away from Saul because he's like, I just need a break. I don't want this guy breathing down my neck every second. I don't want to be living in caves or hiding. I just want a break. No, this was he settled. And it wasn't just him. It was all 600 of his men and their families. So this is a big group of people that he just moved in there. I can't help but wonder what his men thought, right? They were following this guy who was anointed to be the king of Israel one day, and here he is living in a land of his enemies. by all default, they should murder everyone in this land, right? But they want to just live there safely. And the place you run to for safety can become the place that slowly reshapes who you are. If you put yourself in a bad circle or around bad people, that will infect you no matter what over time. It's a very dangerous game to play because you don't notice it. It's going to be years later till you realize that you're not the same person you used to be, simply because you made a bad call, you didn't inquire of God, and now you're kind of living out. You've made your bed and you're living in it. My senior year of college, I didn't graduate. I finished with 121 credits. I needed 124 to graduate. And so instead of paying for room and board, having way more debt, you can do this thing called what's called a CLEP test, where there's like this list of pre-approved topics, and you study on your own, and then you can take the test, and you have to get 50 points or higher, and then you get those credits. And so I'm like, I'm just going to do that. And so I studied for a couple months. I don't even remember what topic it was, and I got a 49 instead of 50. So naturally, I did what everyone would have done, and that was said, I'm done with education and school, and I'm just going to get a job and make money and just whatever. You know what I mean? I hate school. So I got a job at Myers Distribution Warehouse. I don't know if you guys know where that is, over by Newport Road. And I was in the cold storage unit, which means I worked in negative 15 degrees for 10 hours a day, which for Michigan, it honestly wasn't that big of a deal. I feel like you just kind of used to it, but it was rough. It was rough. And so what you did was you had a high-low and you had a little pallet behind it, and they'd give you this like big pack of stickers, and you would go up and down this giant freezer, and you would slap these stickers on these things, and you'd load the boxes on your pallet. You'd get done, your pallet would be like over your head. You'd have to wrap the whole thing, drop it off at a door where a truck would be, all in a certain amount of time. And if you went over the time limit, you were fired, which is crazy. But I was there for 11 weeks, and I watched 90 people quit or get fired behind me. And so it was kind of like, and it's so bad that the people who have worked there for a little while, they won't even talk to you for at least a month and a half because there's so much turnover. There's no point in investing in these people that you're just meeting. And that's just the truth of it. Like this guy could be gone tomorrow, so I'm not even going to talk to him. That's what they did. And so I wore it like a badge of pride that I made it to 11 weeks. And at 12 weeks, you were able to join the union, and you were a little safer. And so I was like, okay, I just got to get to 12 weeks. I had made it in with the boys. Everyone was cool. And I'll never forget this. The boss came out one day, and he goes, hey, Rick, I see that you're up for, next week you're going to make it, that's great. And he said, I was going through your file, and I saw that you have some college on there. Like, what's the deal with that? And I said, well, I was 3 credits short. I failed this test. And so I was like, I'm done. And so he goes, oh, okay. He goes, yeah, that's what I thought. And so he put his arm around my shoulder. This guy that he's just a boss. And he goes, I'm going to give you 2 options today. And I was like, what's that? And he goes, you can quit and go get that degree finished and start your life, or I'm going to fire you. And you're going to go do it anyways. And I was like, I thought, dude, I was psyched about, joining the union and doing all this stuff. And he's like, no, those are your choices. And I was like, why? He said, you are compromising your future, and you have better options. And so he was showing me these guys. He's like, none of these guys here have 3 credits left before before they graduate. Like, you're blowing it, man. And so it was, that was a big day. And so I quit, which I had never really quit a job at that point. And so I got a job where I was making less and working less so that I could study, and I passed it. And I got a job as a social worker down in Toledo working with kids that were impoverished and were addicted to drugs. And so I became a substance abuse counselor. And that was my first big boy job. And that was a big, big day because I was compromising, and I was deciding to live in it. I was dead okay with just working at Meijer until something happened, But luckily, this guy was divinely put in my path and told me I didn't have an option, you know. Be careful where fear is leading you. Fear will tell you to isolate. Fear will tell you to compromise your values. Fear will tell you to trust what's familiar, even if it's unhealthy. Not every escape is in God's direction. Point 3. Compromise always requires maintenance. Once David is in the Philistine territory, he has a problem. He's living amongst the enemy, right? But still leading God's people, right, his people. So what does he do? He starts lying. He's raiding these people groups who are the bad guys, people that he should be raiding as a king of Israel, but he's killing everyone. Men, women, children. He's wiping out the whole population. And he's taking all of their stuff, and when he comes back, the king goes, where were you raiding? And he would tell them towns or people that were Israelites. So Achish thinks this guy's just making himself stinky, and to his own people, I can trust him. David's lying again and again and again. A web of deception is getting bigger and bigger. And here's the thing about compromise. You don't just fall into it. You have to keep feeding it, right? You don't just compromise once. One lie leads to another. One compromise leads to more. Now David's living a double life. To the king of the Philistines, he's a great guy to have around. But then to his own men, you know, he's trying to be the king of Israel. He's trying to be this guy, the leader, and he's not. He's lying. He's setting a poor example. When I was 13, I wanted a set of samurai swords because they're sick, right? Who wouldn't want one, right? I was 13. Give me a break. I went on eBay, found a killer deal, and it was a set of 3 samurai swords for $15, right? And this is back in the day when eBay was like the real eBay, right? It was just auction. There was no buy it now price. There was none of that stuff. And so I was like, oh, I can use my dad's credit card. It's only $15. He's not even going to notice this, right? It's going to be such a small amount that he's just going to glaze over it. But I didn't pay attention, and there was $30 of shipping that was taxed on there right at the end. And I was like, well, now it's a matter of time before I die because the whole thing was messed up. So the swords get there. I hide them. I dread every day that my dad's going to walk through the door and just be like, I'm going to kill you. You know what I mean? Like, what happened? And so eventually it does. And so the lies just start flowing, right? In that moment, the lies, I didn't know it was an auction. I didn't know it was real money. I didn't know I actually bought them. I thought someone else bought, I thought it was an accident. I didn't know I won. I thought someone else won, but then they charged me for some reason. Like, you just start making all these crazy lies up, and you have to double down. Right? You just keep digging deeper and deeper. And I would like to say that habit stops when you're a 13-year-old, but I fear that it still happens, right? Even as an adult, we get caught up in something, and then you have that choice. And you start with one lie, and then it just snowballs into something that's way bigger, to the point where you got to dig your heels in and just, that's your story, and you're sticking to it, right? Which is not a great philosophy. That's not how we're supposed to be. And so if you find yourself constantly covering your tracks, justifying your actions, hoping no one finds out, you are not walking in freedom. You're maintaining compromise. And that is an exhausting life. The double life is an exhausting life. I can tell you from experience, it is exhausting. He doesn't call you to manage your sin. He calls you to leave it. Point 4, God's faithfulness doesn't depend on your perfection. God's faithfulness doesn't depend on your perfection. Here's the incredible part about the chapter. Even though David is far off track, God is not done with him, right? This isn't the end of David, right? The Bible doesn't just start with some new awesome guy. He dies in this, in a pile of self-pity where he's just like, yep, it's going to happen. Saul comes, kills him, and that's the end of the story. That's not what happens. That is not the end of David's story. And there is great hope in that, right? We get to see David's life lived out. Sure, he makes a few more bad decisions, but no one ever said he was perfect, right? He wasn't Jesus. And so the Bible's filled with men and women of great faith that just make terrible decisions just like us, which is great and reassuring and helpful to learn from. God doesn't abandon David. He doesn't revoke the promise that he's going to be the king. In fact, this chapter sets up the next move of God in David's life. That doesn't excuse David's behavior, but it reveals something powerful. God's faithfulness is bigger than your future. His faithfulness is bigger than your future. You cannot out-sin his love. You cannot outrun his love. You cannot go too far. There is no point of no return with the Lord. He is relentlessly pursuing you with unconditional love, and the sooner you accept that you're going to lose that bet, the better. David will recover. He will return. He will still become king. Not because he was perfect, but because God is faithful. What's real crazy is I've read ahead, and I'm familiar with this part. And spoiler alert, there's not that much time left before he becomes king. And so I think that's something to take note of, is when he is the closest to God doing what he has planned to do with him his whole life, he is in his feelings, right? And I feel personally I've been there, right? And this is something that we can't gloss over, that this is something that really needs to take a hold in our eyes and our minds, and that is, if you are going through a challenging time in your life right now, or you feel like the Lord is not letting up, you are getting hit with a ton of bricks from every angle, and it's relentless, that is a test. This is the Lord saying, how faithful are you? Do you really love me? Do you really believe that I can pull you out of this pit and save you and make things better? And you have to pay attention to those times in your life, because that's where you learn yourself, like, oh, I wasn't as faithful as I thought I was. I didn't believe as much as I thought I did. And so those things can encourage us, because like David came out of this great. But in this moment, he allowed feelings to get the best of him. And that is a dangerous thing to do, that we all do, right? Feelings are very powerful. Emotions are very powerful. And so at the end of the day, this has to be your source of truth. And so if you are experiencing negative thoughts, difficult times, you have to ask yourself, what is the truth? Is this true? 9 times out of 10, they're lies from the devil himself that you're believing. And you think that things are worse, or that God doesn't love you, or that this is it, this is just how my life's going to be. No. Those are lies from hell itself. The Lord has good things in store for those who seek him. He has great plans for you, plans to prosper you. Those aren't lies. God can't lie. So if he said it in the Bible, which he did, then he means it. He's a man of his word. So you can take those promises to the bank. One of the things that I recommend to new Christians, young Christians, anyone, is that you memorize a handful of promises of God. Because that's your truth. Because if you start to have a rough time, that's what you need to go back to. Is this true? Does it go against any of these promises? Most of the time, it does. It is the exact contradiction of what God actually says. He cannot take back his word. He will not change his word. He is perfect. There are no errors. That's what you set your faith in. A couple years ago, actually it might have been just last summer, I was researching the best ways to teach your kid how to ride a bike, because I was really failing in that fatherhood category. My son wanted to. He was 6. I felt like that was way too late to learn to ride a bike. I rode mine when I was 3. Slight brag. But I wanted him to get going. And he wasn't. And so I'm watching videos, and I came across one where I was crying, laughing so hard, because It was a real dad who set up his camcorder in the yard, and he's filming his son, and his son is just biting it. And he's just filming the whole thing, and the kid's just crashing over and over. And eventually this kid gets so ticked that he rips his helmet off and just chucks it at the house. And he's like, I'm done. And it was like this home movie of a video. But then the dad did something that I almost started crying when I watched it, because the dad walks up to him and the kid goes, I can't do it. I can't ride a bike. And the dad said, you're not bad at riding a bike. You're just new at falling. And that stuck to me, because it was he decided to reframe the whole experience, right? With kids, it's all about reframing the experience, right? And we're just children. We're just older. And so to say that it's not that you're bad at riding, because you could be an amazing bike rider. You're just new to falling, and that's a part of the process. Just like sinners, or just like Christians. You're not a bad Christian because you still sin, or because you have all these sins that you're dealing with or that you're trying to do. It's just that you're still a work in progress, like the rest of us. I've been in church for over 30 years now, and one of the biggest things you learn real fast is the people that come here aren't saints, right? And so it blows my mind when new believers come to a church and that's what they expect, right? They think all of us have it mastered. We're all just mini Jesuses, right? That's not what happened. We're here because we know we're a hot mess and we need someone to intervene on a daily basis. And so, you would think that's not a lesson you would have to learn. We all believe that, right? We all believe we're messed up and we need help. That's why we're here. We're not here because we think we've got it together. And it doesn't take too far to look, especially in my own life, to realize, I need a lot of help still, even after 30 years of doing this thing. And that's the best part, is God is with you through it all. He doesn't forsake you. He is there. You will have your big moments, your mountaintop experiences with the Lord, where He provides in some miraculous, huge way. You just have to give it time. You will overcome that sin that you have been battling for years, and you feel like it's just a part of who you are, right? This is just who I am. I'm never going to be able to defeat this thing. And so that's just my cross to bear. That's what we like to say, right? That's our cross to bear. No. There's a plan, and there's victory in that plan. You just got to give it time. You're not the author. You're not the one writing the story. So you got some lessons still to learn, apparently, before the Lord decides that it's okay to take it. Maybe you've had a chapter 27 moment. You've made a fear-based decision. You've compromised. You've drifted. But the good news is God isn't finished with you yet. Your failure is a chapter, not the conclusion. 1 Samuel 27 is not a story of David's strength, it's a story of his weakness. But even more, it's a story of God's steady, unwavering faithfulness. So here's the challenge. Remember what God has done. Don't let fear write your decisions. Refuse to live in compromise. And trust that even when you falter, God remains faithful. Because the same God who delivered David from the lion, the bear, and Goliath is the same God who will carry you through the seasons when your faith feels thin. Don't build your life on how you feel in the moment. Build it on what you know to be true about God. Because feelings change, circumstances change, but God never does. Would you pray with me?